Now, I have the distinct honor of introducing our distinguished keynote speaker today. Jacqueline Elena Featherstone is an educator, writer, and visionary who challenges social and political inequality on multiple fronts. Her interactive and engaging lectures address classism, racism, sexism, and heterosexism while promoting alliance building across multiple domains. She helps her audiences recognize, acknowledge, and understand their own cultural identity as well as that of others, clarifying the impact of our similarities and differences in personal, interpersonal, institutional, and cultural contexts. In addition to her work with educational institutions and city governments on economic justice, educational, gender, and racial equity issues, Featherstone conducts workshops and seminars throughout the country. She's the founder of Featherstone and Associates, a group that provides consulting and training to assist individuals and organizations in creating and maintaining equitable personal and professional relationships. Featherstone is the producer and director of Alice Walker, Visions of the Spirit, an award-winning documentary film. She's also the editor of the groundbreaking anthology, Skin Deep, Women Writing on Color, Culture, and Identity. Her writings have appeared in numerous magazines and journals. Please join me in extending a warm Southwestern College welcome to Jacqueline Elena Featherstone.
Good morning. I need to find out how to use the technology, which I will doubtlessly break. I have a gift. Thank you. Okay. Listening to introductions that precede you, it's really a weird experience. Because there's a catalog of things that you have done and very little about what and who you are in the moment. In the moment, I am doing a lot of consulting and a lot of work with people in the Tenderloin to get them organized around policing issues in their community. But some of the things that I thought about in terms of culture that we often don't talk about, some of which you can see and some of which you can't, that says who I am, are the following. I'm Black or African American. I'm also Scottish and Creek. I was raised a Baptist, though I went to Catholic church regularly with the Castillos, who were like my extended family. I'm straight, heterosexual, skinny, femme. I have learning disabilities. I've been recently diagnosed with the onset of Parkinson's. I was raised multi-class. My mom was a nurse, making her middle class in the Black community, and still kind of working class in the larger, greater community. I identify as a cisgender female. I prefer the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm 68 years old. My primary language is English, though I speak and butcher a smattering of Spanish and German. I was born and raised in the United States, and in my family of origin, my parents were divorced. I was raised in a single-parent family. In my current family, I am divorced with adult children and 6 amazing grandchildren. I'm an educator, an equity trainer, an organizational consultant, and I've been blessed to do this work for 35 years. What I would like to do before I go any further is to take a moment to honor and pay respect to the indigenous people, past and present, on whose land we all sit. Often this gets neglected, and it's one of the ways of making connection with both our present and our past, and our future with a different script than the one we might normally have. So if all of us would just, for the moment, think of indigenous people that we know, or that we don't, because often we act as though they've disappeared, and thank them for caretaking this land upon which we are now able to have this congregation today. This speech has changed numerous times since I said I would give it, primarily because I don't give speeches anymore. I do a lot of consulting, I do a lot of training, I spend a lot of time talking. I'm going to try to do less of that, even though this is supposed to be a speech, because I was so moved by something that happened 3 days ago. I was sent a videotape of a man, a disabled man, who was set upon in his community in a way that the woman who contacted me found really egregious. And I was touched by it because what came up for me is that despite the many differences that we can see, we are all connected. We are one. And if one person is being badly treated, then we all are being affected by that treatment. And I thought, I'm going to be in front of 1,000 people who influence the learning and influence the lives of multiple thousands of young people and prepare them for leadership. What kind of leadership ultimately can you prepare them for in all of your roles, not just those who are academicians, but I'm going to leave people out. You can sing out if I do. What do the campus police teach each other and your students? What do they learn from people in food service? What do they learn from their interactions with the people on the clerical staff? You all have this amazing responsibility and opportunity to influence the future, and I wanted to think about how that might be done. And I came up with 2 key concepts. Oh, I haven't broken it yet. The notion of cultural humility, which differs from cultural competency, because cultural competency suggests that we can actually become competent in somebody else's culture. I'm barely competent in my own. There are times I catch my mind doing things that shock and amaze me, and I think, where'd that thought come from? So, cultural humility is a lifelong learning, a commitment to lifelong learning. It's a commitment to being self-reflective. It's a commitment to self-critique. It also is committed to redressing power imbalances that we find in our culture and society. And last but not least, it's committed to creating and maintaining mutually beneficial, non-paternalistic partnerships with people and communities, especially those who have been previously disempowered. And a script. A script is, well, it's a narrative and a story that we live by, often without knowing that we're involved in a script. I'm involved in a script right now. As my hand shakes, I'm involved in a script that comes from my internalized ableism that says there's something wrong with that, and that your seeing that makes me less than. It makes me appear weak. That's nothing that you've said, because you're sitting out there, this sea of amazing faces and amazing people, and I'm having this internal dialogue with myself about how I'm less than, because my script says we're supposed to be able-bodied, whatever that means. And if we're not, then we begin to mark ourselves and others in very distinctive ways with stories that we have about what that means. And if there are 1,400 people in the room, there are 1,400 stories about what it could mean, from it means nothing to it's a betrayal of your body. So we're going to talk more about scripts and their impact, but they're basically the stories we live by, and they influence the interactions that we have. But before we talk about cultural humility and cultural scripts, I want to talk about cultural introductions. I was surprised and happy to see that there are so many new employees, so this won't be you having a conversation with people that you've known for the last 40 years about something that you've probably already talked about. But what I would like you to do is maybe break a script about what we say in an introduction in a professional setting, and actually find someone, just a person near you, to pair and share your name, if necessary, and what you do at the at the college, something about how you identify culturally, one thing you appreciate about your culture and why, and one thing about your culture that helps or hinders you in your work. Questions? Yeah, people are sitting there going, now? You have 2 minutes each. Try to talk to somebody that you don't always talk to, if you can. And take 2 minutes and have that conversation. All right, may I have your attention? I'm going to do a couple of exercises with you, so I neglected to say, use a hand signal I learned working with kindergartners and first graders. When I raise my hand and you see my hand up, raise your hand and end your sentence and look back up at the center of the room. It keeps me from shouting, your time's up. And quiets the room pretty quickly. And when there are 1,000 people, got to be pretty loud and pretty tough to shout you down. So we won't do that. What I'd like to do for a rebrief is have people just sort of raise their hands and I'll call on you or call out what you appreciate about your culture. The room was a bubble with conversation. Ask people to sing out and it's like silence, we care for nothing in our culture. Food. Music. Family. Now I'm hearing a lot at once. Somebody out here said something, I didn't hear it. Values. Language. Art. And I thought I heard storytelling. All of those are things that we appreciate. It's really important to pay attention to what we appreciate because a lot of conversation is about what we need to change. So I ask about culture and I hear food and I hear music and I hear language. And those are things that I consider to be above the waterline. And the really interesting pieces about culture are below the waterline, like an iceberg. And one person mentioned it, I heard one person mention it, and they said values. How we raise our children. What our relationship to time is. How closely can you stand to someone before it's impolite? Who do you speak to first? All of these things are culturally inscripted in us, and we don't think about those things. So when I say the word culture, what do you think about? What does the word culture even mean to you? Just a couple popcorn answers out of the room. Cyclops. I thought I heard somebody say way of being. The way we live. Thank you. There are all sorts of academic expressions of what culture means, but I'm going to go with Octavio Paz, who says, culture is a society's style, its way of living and dying. It embraces the exotic, the erotic, and the culinary arts, dancing and burial, courtesy and curses, work and leisure, rituals and festival, punishments and rewards, dealing with the dead and with the ghosts who people our dreams, our attitudes towards women, children, old people, strangers, enemies and allies, eternity and the present, the here and now and the beyond. I like that because it's so humanizing and it's so true and so real. And we reduce that often academically to sample cultural groups like these. Not to say that they do not shape who we are and are part of culture, but they are not all that there is to culture. Some of them are markers of diversity and difference that are given meaning by our scripts, and we will come back to those scripts. And so peeping the game about what's expected is really important. One of the scripts that my granddaughter, who now studies at UC Davis, peeped early on in her youth was the idea of what a girl, and hence a woman, was supposed to be. She came home from kindergarten and she said to me, "Grandma, I've decided I'm going to be the king." Which brought me up short because I wasn't really sure where that conversation was going. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Why are you going to be the king? She said, because they read a story to me today, and all the queen did was sit around and do nothing, and nobody listened to her. And the king did everything, and people listened to him, so I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be the king. She, at barely 5, had peeped the script about the roles men and women have in our culture. And she was being indoctrinated in school by a well-intentioned teacher who didn't recognize the script nor recognize her role in passing on that script. So this is why scripts are important, and we'll keep coming back to them again and again, because the script that you carry about your students and about their possibilities will influence what you bring to them, what you give to them, what you leave them with, and how they function in the world, whether they hold up the existing culture or they do something transformative with it by transforming their scripts. One of the scripts that we have, get ready to get nervous. If you do get nervous, there's a technique that I'll tell you afterwards that you can do that helps ground you a little bit, but beforehand, just breathe into it, it's okay. We're going to talk about our script about race. And we're going to do it in a fairly harmless way. We're going to look at these two children. And I want to know what you know about them, just looking at them. Can you tell their race, their religion, their body type, their age, their sexual identity? Any of those things that are enumerated there. What can you tell about them? So I'm going to ask you to consider those things, and then I'm going to invite you, and it's just an invitation, to do what you just did a few moments ago and share what you think you know about them just looking at them. Are you reluctant to share with people what you think you know about them? No, that's a real question. Just take a minute. Thank you So I'm going to move this along a little bit more quickly than I would have. Can you tell what race they are? Some people say yes, some people say no. For the people who are saying yes, what race is the person in the picture on top? Somebody said mixed. All right. What else? Does everybody agree with mixed? I heard a yes, and then I heard something in the back of the room. Cuban? Human. Definitely human. Except when she loses her temper. African American, at least partially. Class. Can you tell what class she is? No. Can you tell anything about her physical ability? No. What her primary language is? No. Her gender? Not really. Excellent. I heard a not really and I heard a hmm. Anybody who thinks they can tell what her gender is, raise your hand. There are a couple raised hands. Any way whatsoever to tell what religion she is? No. Okay, so we're on the same page. The picture below, can you tell what race the child is? Caucasian, I hear Caucasian. Is everybody in agreement? Some people say no. The people who are saying no, what do you say? I can't hear you. Say again. You think he's mixed? It's possible. Not necessarily, but possible. Can you tell what gender the child is? Primary language, nationality, physical ability, body structure, ethnicity? No, none of those things, except we make those distinctions for our adult selves about other adults all the time, just walking down the street. There's an old New Yorker cartoon in which there's a white man walking down the street in one direction and a black man coming towards him from the other direction. And what's going on in the bubbles in their head is the white man is saying he has a FedEx package. He's whistling Sondheim. And something else that I can't remember. And the black man's saying he's humming Motown. He's in the wrong neighborhood. They both think that about each other, that they're in the wrong neighborhood, because they both feel that they belong in the neighborhood, but the other, whatever the other is, doesn't. And all of these things are going through their heads so that they can decide whether or not to do one thing, and that's say hi as they pass each other. So we engage in these processes all the time. The person who said the children are mixed is probably right. However, that's a US script about race. In Brazil, both of these children are white. In South Africa, the one on the bottom is white, and the one on the top is colored. In the world of reality, both of these children in slave language would be called quadroons. They're both 1/4 African American, and the way that I know is they're my grandchildren. They no longer look like this, she says longingly, looking at their little pictures. The one on top is 25 and is at Davis. The one on the bottom is turning 12 and is going to middle school. The languages that they speak, they both speak English. I don't know as a primary language because the one on the top also speaks Spanish because her parents, at least one, is Nicaraguan. And her abuelita speaks to her in Spanish all the time and made sure that she was bilingual and knew her culture. The one on the bottom speaks French because his mother also wanted him to know his culture. So in our family, there is real multicultural diversity that exists. And I am shocked at how fast I want to move this along, so what do I want to talk about really quickly? I was going to talk about definition of race, but you were sophisticated enough as an audience to recognize that race doesn't tell all stories. I talked a little bit about cultural humility. I'm going to jettison this and go here really quickly to the process of change. What all of this conversation about scripts is about recognizing that we are moving as a society from a monocultural society to what we hope will be a multicultural society. Moving from a society that practices exclusion based on certain behaviors, ways of being, and often race, to an inclusive society that takes all of our differences and utilizes them to make the world that we live in richer and more expansive. And where we are in that process is right in the center. I wish I had a little clicker. But where we say recognize, acknowledge, understand, and appreciate, that's where we are. We're just starting the conversation. We're just beginning to know that it's okay to see differences and to ask questions and to challenge our scripts. We're starting to acknowledge and unlearn our biases, which means moving beyond our culturally constructed worldviews and really broadening the lens that we bring to our conversations. Appreciating means coming to experiencing that equity doesn't mean the same and valuing difference. That is the hardest thing, because often when we talk about appreciating culture, what we ask ourselves is, what makes us the same? So we can build on that. We never look at, or rarely have we looked at in the past, what makes us different and what learning comes with that? What new ways of being does that offer to us? And we're beginning to have that conversation so that we can utilize the difference, which means tapping everybody's knowledge. Everybody in this room brings home knowledge that enriches this campus. You are, in fact, the backbone and the foundation of what this institution is about. If you are not cultivating learning, if you are not cultivating service, if you are not working with each other in ways that are respectful and honor the differences and acknowledge the power differences and find ways to disrupt them, then you're not bringing that into your interactions with your students. How much time do I have? I have 0 time. Okie dokie. Let me take a minute to take a deep breath and ask what I wanted to do. Okay, I wanted to, if I can do nothing else, I would like to talk about how we minimize the space between us, because scripts, made-up information, and the stories that we've been taught to tell. There was one exercise I desperately wanted to do in which the quiz was going to be, what community is this? And I would read off to you a lot of realities that would sound like any number of cultures in the United States. The majority group brought the minority group into the country primarily as slave labor. The minority group is seen as stupid and violent. The children of the minority group were forced to go to segregated schools. The schools in which there are a lot of minority students are seen as problematic. And there are a few other markers. And then I asked the question, what group is this? So for the sake of conversation, what group is this? And talk loudly, because this is a big room. Say again? The Irish? Say again? They could be Spanish. They could be Indians. Could be Chinese. They could be Africans. Say again? They could be Mexican. They could be Filipino. What she wanted to point out was that this is a script about maintaining inequality. The group actually being discussed in the particular piece were Koreans in Japan. The Rwandans played out this script on each other. So it's beginning to understand, to look at the script so that we can understand how it provides a space between us that allows us to make agreements that cause us to dehumanize ourselves and each other. And so minimizing the space between us is the one thing that I want us to think about. Begin to anticipate that what you're doing may be part of a script, so that you can see the script, yours and the person that you're interacting with, so that you can rewrite the script, which means redressing the power. And sometimes calling it out is enough. Sometimes just saying, that feels uncomfortable, and giving the reason why it jolts your humanity is enough to interrupt a script. And then recreate environments where scripts can be called out and where the space between you is minimized by creating beneficial partnerships with and within communities that are not like your own. And I think I've run over by at least 3 minutes, so what can I say? Thank you for your time.